Thank you so much, Lauren. We had a lot, Caroline, just now about cultural organizations in New York. And one of the things I wanted to ask you about, this talk is about Paris. We'll always have Paris. There's a lot of energy in Paris, and I'm sure that might mean that there's a lot of collaboration and perhaps competition. How do you think about that when you're planning your exhibitions? You've just opened a major exhibition. How do you go about that, thinking about the other major cultural players in the city when you think of your own shows?
Well, first, so the organization get bigger. Excuse my bad English, so I hope I'm going to be understandable. Opening the place in Paris, we changed a bit the structure. So now there's we are three: Emma Lavigne, who's the director of the collection, Jean-Marie Gallet, and myself as curators. And François Pinault is always involved in the decisions of which shows we're going to have. The show which just opened, which is quite a success, is based on the collection with, how to say, including Kim Soya, who's made a floor with glasses. So there's a kind of involvement with the public. We spoke a lot about community. It's very important to all of us that we have a public with us, even if there is some more focused, like Ronnie Horn and Felix was more focused, but very, it was after COVID, so it was also a thought about what disease means. And Paris in general, there's a big change. It was reassuring that after COVID, there was so many public who wanted to go back to music, to institution in general, which made me a relief because it was very, as here at that time, we get doubts on everything. And then there's a lot more artists coming to live in Paris. There's a lot more galleries, and there's a lot more of institution, which it's competition, but it's also dynamic in between. And I think, plus Basel Fair who came, the city can offer an incredible level of culture in general, including movies, theaters, dance, and it's part of the DNA in France, which I hope is not going to change, to have a lot of culture, vision, culture help, culture. It's very specific the way dance, small shapes, dance, theater. There's a lot of big, small, and same with the little contemporary, how we call it, Kunsthalle, which are in Paris and in the neighborhood. So to make a bridge in between the outdoors of Paris and indoors. And there's some private initiative like Artagon or Push that you might know, which receives, it's great studios for artists, which is mixed in terms of generation. So it makes a kind of dynamic also.
We heard a little bit about the kind of political structure and the funding structure here in America. One of the things that's really helped buoy the French system was in 2003, the so-called Ayagon laws, which gave an enormous boost. There were these tax breaks for charitable giving, meaning that the state's funding has been increasingly complemented by private giving, resulting in these major developments, including, of course, the opening of the new museum in the Bourse du Commerce in 2021 by Pinault after a $170 million renovation. How important is that understanding of that kind of partnership between state and private individuals working together in Paris?
First, I would like to precise that the Pinault Collection, it's not a foundation, is it's the private money of the family, which is founding it. It's not a company. Like LVMH, it's the company who runs it, so that's very different. And the founding of institution, when it's public institution like Beaubourg or like the Palais de Tokyo, it's a constant merge. It was not at all in the French culture to do that because we have a state culture, we have the idea of state. So it's changed, it's a lot more there, so to speak. But on the same time, there's some private donors from like which are opening price or opening, they also want to exist on themselves. I totally understood here the problem with the public, and that it's easier to find with the building or the collection, but not the maintain. It's a bit the same, and I think this is the big problem. And if, with the optimism of Mr. Great Glenn Laurie, we speak more about community, maybe it will change that, but it's not so obvious. And as here, there's the threat of having less money and of the crisis, which is there. So I think it's getting more difficult. And regarding that, as well as ecological thing, everything is looked at about the expenses, about the shipping, about the so it's not easy.
So do you feel, when we talk about this energy that's been in Paris recently, it's a confluence of things? There's been obviously the benefit maybe of Brexit. You talk about all of these, you talked about the Basel Fair, the galleries, the museums. But as someone who lives in Paris, you're so familiar with the scene. What do you think it is that is making the scene more dynamic these days? And what do you think it is that makes the scene?
As usual, it's a mixture of all those kind. It goes from those studios which are visible. It's like there's a lot more people involved than it used to be in terms of being interested in contemporary art. That's for sure. And it goes from gallery, association, group of collectors to learn, the Friends of Museum to learn, the fact that there's, for example, an organization to make a mix, because to reach, someone spoke about the suburbs, so to reach the suburbs you need to go there. You cannot wait that they can come here. So it's, for example, the Louvre is doing a fantastic job. There's an association making job to bring the people in between. So that's a sense of community. So it's a bit all of that which makes Paris alive. And there's also more mixed. For example, today there's a show at the Palais de Tokyo with Mohamed Bourouissa. So it's not as here, but it's also having more diversity in terms of people to look, artists to look at, which might address more diversity question also, which I think is important in general. And how to say, it's not the public here, for sure. In galleries, there's a lot less public in Paris than there is here, which is I'm always fascinated in the States that the contemporary is inside, it's the nature. In France, we had it's more inside the literature or the things with words. So it's something that all of us try to change. And what was important is that on the territory, there is places like that quite well distributed in between the Kunstallee and the Macval in the suburbs, and same in the territory all over France. So we were very late in contemporary. If I recall, Picasso was not shown before 1947 in France. It's like even if he was living there. And thanks to Jacques Lang, who made the original collection to make it alive with the goal of sharing. So the goal of doing things with classes, doing things with agriculture, whatever. So that's quite a long time that there is that system. But with whatever happens in ecology and in politics, in money crisis, nothing is solid as we wish it could be. But I don't have an answer on that.
So before the Bourse opened, you said you expected it to be another dynamic and larger audience. And the difference between Venice and Paris is that in Paris you can build a public, whereas in Venice you have people passing through because Venice is a smaller town. What were your expectations of the audience in Paris, and what has happened since? What kind of audience have you built in Paris, and what are their expectations? What expectations do you think What expectations did you have, and what have you come to discover are their expectations of you now?
So we work with, we have a great public team to take care of the public in Paris, as well as the education program, as well. I mean, we do a lot. It was at the beginning, well, we had the opening and there were a lot of people, but the thing is that the museum is open during daytime. The experiment of having museum open at night doesn't work so well if I look at the other institution. So we fight to get a younger public because it's obviously people who's not working who can come more easily, and then we make specific appointments. We make special price for younger people. We made all that. And then we have collaboration with different kind of schools, not just the neighborhood and all that. So the public evolved, and it's also linked with the program. So there's some artists to bring a lot more younger people because it addresses younger questions. So it's an equilibrium between the two, and also as here, as part of the institution are based on tourism, which was not at all there at the beginning, because so it's always an equilibrium. But we're happy with there's quite a number of people.
You said to me when we spoke before this that the public is much more interesting than we think, and you don't need to make spectacular shows. Can you talk a little bit about what you mean about the public, this kind of faith that you have in them?
Well, what is fascinating is that there's a word of mouth, which I'm sure it's existing here too. For example, Yan Vo, who's not such a known artist, so to speak, or compared to Matisse, for example, the work we did in the Rotonda became a word of mouth. And so that means that it starts to grow and grow. This is which I think a community, though, because it addresses ecological question. I mean, I cannot answer exactly why, but they understand the fact that it changed the perspective of the space. So the space is an old building from 1889, and it's been redo by Tadeu Wando, so it's quite impressive with a huge rotonda. And also, so that was a word of mouth. And also, I think with the biggest contemporary and really only contemporary public space in the center of Paris, compared to Bobo, who does contemporary but also retrospective of more established artists, compared to, even if contemporary is a lot more everywhere than before, they do a program at Orsay, they do a program at the Orangerie, but we are more with the younger artists or live artists. So there's a lot of questions which are raised. For example, Serre Serpa, that you have here at the Whitney, we were very early on with her, and she represents a whole new generation, a whole new way of looking. It's a lot more transversal. She's concerned by music, identity, body, which are fashion, even if you don't see it. And this is a really younger generation, and the same thing happens in France as in here, which I refer, if I refer there.
With artists like that, how do you stay so ahead? You know, you've been identifying artists ahead of other people for so many years. How do you stay so fresh in your own perception of what's happening?
Well, first is, so I used to run also the Plateau, which the FRAC Île-de-France, which I had to be very fresh. So it's a way of being, I think. I have to, so I'm very close with a lot of artists, so they always also speak about someone else. Then I try to go to biennales, which is a way to discover different people. It's true that it takes some time because also to go to, there's a lot of studios in Paris with foreign people, which are, so it's interesting to visit them. So there's different ways. Of course, there's also the galleries. I don't mean there's not the galleries, but there's the galleries, a bit like here on Tribeca with the younger position and the more established galleries. And also the collection, there's three real big points is that we follow the artists we start to work with in time. We are on that level. It's important to take risk with younger, which we might be wrong, of course. We don't, it's not for lifetime. And again, when we start, we follow. So it's an implication with them on the long run. So we cannot take so many young ones all the time. And when I see something which I'm surprised, like I always need to meet the artist to be sure there's a project behind.
You said this to me, you said you want to meet them to see there's a project behind, that you're not seduced by one work. Yeah. And I like this idea of being seduced by one work. How do you know whether it's a seduction or a long-term relationship? What's the difference? How do you decipher whether it's a commitment or a seduction?
So that's why I want to meet with the artist and to understand if it's just, because that can happen. We can be seduced by one work, whatever medium, to understand what's the back of it, what's the references, what's the project, what's the position, even if it's the youngest artists have been involved. I met him, he was 23, not even finalizing his diploma. And I say, I want to see what he did before.
Which artist was this, sorry?
This is Paul Taburet. And even if he was really a baby, I had to understand the ambition, in a way, of the project. And it's a bit like Speyer. He's a lot involved with music, with fashion, even if he was young. He's a black artist, and understood that, like a lot of them, that they need to identify with someone positive, and it's more in music or fashion than in art. And he was in a French school, and I was so shocked that he never heard about David Hammons, so I had to talk him about David Hammons. Here, he's a very, very famous person, but in France, before we opened the Bourse, no one knew so much who was David Hammons. Because in the first show, there were a kind of show of David Hammons on the ground floor.
You talked about ambition. Another thing I think is really interesting, you also talked to me about this idea of doubt, that part of your goal when you're organizing an exhibition, when you've made that decision to work with the artist, that what you really want to bring out is this idea of doubt, whether it's the doubt that the artist has in the paintings or the doubt that they have in their thought about their work?
I think that in a long run, when you think of an artist who's already 50 or 60, is to take risk, to stay, to make it move, to make question coming, to make it, is not to just repeat what you know. And that we spoke together about Marlène Dumas, which I did a show with her in Venice, which was incredible. And she speaks all the time about the risk she's taking. But in her case, you see it in the painting itself when you see a bunch, not when you see just one or two. And it's absolutely beautiful, because she can obviously make a seduction painting, but now I know exactly what is a seduction painting on the case of Marlène, and she knows, and she will not share. She doesn't want to just repeat. And all the great artists, as well as in the art history, they all speak about the mistake which made them, Goya included, which made them go further. So it's to allow the mistake, not to be successful all the time. And I think it's a lesson of life.
And how do you, so if you're thinking about acquiring work for a collection, how do you know which one is the mistake and which one's the correct mistake? You know, the mistake that's taking you in a good direction.
So that's there's an intuition. I mean, I cannot give a recipe for this, is for sure. But when you start to know well an artist, you know well what's a turning painting. So we have a show of Julie Méretou with her friends now, and we own a work which is called Black City that you might have seen here, when she started to include color, and that was a turning point, totally turning. So it's important to have to, and François Pinault has a great eye too, so he knows also those turning points, but there's not a recipe. It depends so much on the kind of work, or the kind of medium, the kind of...
You said that part of your job is to keep Monsieur Pinault on his toes. You said he's a fantastic collector in the sense that he likes to be surprised or even disturbed, but he's super quick in his decisions. And you said, sometimes I don't understand anything, I must confess, but it is nice to push the limits. How do you know how far to push the limits? Is it just instinctive sometimes?
No, this is well, again, now it's a work of, we are a group together. It's and it's 16 years I've been working, so there were a lot of different times. But for example, the show we did with Jan Vo in Venice in 2015, he didn't knew what we were, I didn't knew either. We were doing the show together, so it was a way to curate together, and we finished 5 minutes before the press. It was very... But I knew... I knew that it would be original. I knew that it would be a different way of looking at the collection. So it's interesting to also, I mean, everyone here knows that, I'm sure, but you can change the meaning of a work the way you show it. And you can kill a work if you badly put it. So I knew Jan is very, very good on putting in a great way. So I think we all learned together in the process of that exhibition, which was more communitary. We worked together. It includes Nairi Bargamian, that you must know now because of the Met Commission. So it was a different way of making an exhibition happening. And sadly, we did another one with Thomas House Ergo, which was really during COVID. So it exists very little, but it was also including, each time we pick up someone, we found out 2 months later that Tate wanted to do a show, that other museum wanted to do a show. So we had to fight, to find some of the work we wanted. And also, we have different kind of exhibition, like just the collection, like today in Paris. A monographic show like we have in Venice with Pierre Rig at the Punta and with Julie Méretou at the Palazzo Grassi, or thematical show based on the collection, and we can add some work. So this is the different kind of exhibition. And it's very different in between Venice, which is a city of people passing, so the show stays for 10 months. As in Paris, we're trying to find the right rhythm, which is more or less 2 big moments.
Your degree was in psychoanalysis. I wonder how much you bring that to bear in the work you do. You talked about how you did go to art school about 10 or 15 years ago, but you found it a little boring and you left.
Yeah. But it's also that it's very difficult to go back to a study with working on the same time, and I could not afford to not working, so, and I didn't want to borrow and to be far from working. So I guess it's a way of being. Psychoanalysis is trying to go beyond words, and for me, art is going beyond words. I've been always obsessed with museums. So when I was 6 or 7, my dream was to travel to see exhibition, but it had no clue with I didn't thought it was possible at all. It was and it happened when I was interested also in computers, in the system. So it's a kind of meta language, so to speak, and a more day-by-day language. And in art, I think you have both. It's beyond words, but you have both kind of perception. And you have to link your head and your body also when it's a great, you always feel something. It's like also with music, you feel something. And I believe in art to change people because you can feel something. Even the French public is very different than the Italian or than the American. The French always want an explanation, and I'm always saying, trying to push them not to have an explanation. You can have whatever explanation after, but it's beyond explanation. A great work of art is always beyond, I think.
You said that the curators that you've really admired, you see them as entrepreneurs.
Well, it's a belief, and it's a belief in a view, I would say, which is taking risk. So that's why I make a comparison with entrepreneur, which is taking risk to make a living or to make a company, or to. It's based on risk. It's not based on the having.
What are the risks you're taking now? Which are the shows you're thinking about? What are the ideas you're thinking about?
So again, I'm part of a group, so it's I can speak of the next show I'm doing. It will be with a lot of productions. So new works.
New work. I wanted to ask you a little bit about, you talked about the long-term relationships that you have. You mentioned Julie, the show that you've just opened, and Julie's someone you worked with before the collection, worked with Julie, and you worked with Julie as well. You have these long-term relationships with people. When you think about the collection, for instance, how do you move forward? There was just news last week that the Pinault family is thinking about succession in terms of Christie's. Monsieur Pinault's grandson is replacing François Pinault on the board. Do you think about legacy planning at the museum in that way and how things will move forward?
So the museum, the Pinault Collection, which is the entity of the three spaces and the collection, is a family goal. So they are on the board, and it's the three generations. So this is, it will continue but that is not announced yet, but it's for sure a family project. It's not just Mr. Pinault, they're all on the board.
How do we talk about Paris, obviously the Olympics are coming up. I was thinking about, I was reading an article last week about the Olympics, and it said that if, Los Angelinos are optimistic and New Yorkers are ambitious, Parisians are defeated about the Olympics. How do you feel about the Olympics and culture? Do you feel good? Talking about energy in Paris, do you feel that we'll bring an energy to the city? Do you embrace it?
Well, we made a lot of research of what happened in other cities in Olympic Games. It's a bit of a lie to what we saw, that it brings more public to institutions. They're so obsessed with the sports, and it's going to be quite super difficult to move around. So we have that great show, which will be still on for the Olympics. I hope it's going to bring some dynamic and economy for the city, but it's a lot of work. It's a bit of a nightmare to move around. It's going to be very difficult to move around during the Olympic Games itself, even if most of the place where they're going to challenge, it's not in town, except Place de la Concorde, but we know it's going to be and according all the other institutions, there's a very few dedicated shows to the Olympics, so to speak, because they know it's not the public who would come. We cannot attract, because of the Olympics, it's very few specific shows. And I hope it gives great attention for other economy for the city than we don't believe so much with the arts. according what happened in London, according what happened in all the different
other cities. Yeah. You talked about your goal as curator, and you said your goal is to share the exhibition and share the artist, to change someone, to make it possible. We were talking a little bit, we heard in the talk before this, anecdotal evidence. Do you, what is, in all the exhibitions you've created, all the artists you've worked with, all the works that you've acquired, for you, where are the moments of satisfaction and pride? What for you is, when you look back on the things you've done, where do you think, I'm really proud of this thing, the change, that position of that artwork, that catalogue? What is the thing that sort of stands out for you?
It's difficult to speak about yourself because it's what we do is for the others. So I always expect more for them to say, but in a way, again with the personality of François Pinault, I think we did a lot of great exhibition, but it's not for me to say, so to speak. But I know we changed people because I spoke with them. I know, for example, Marlène Dumas, it was after COVID, during the Venice Biennale, I saw people in tears. I said, okay, we art wins. It was a time we were not sure of anything anymore. It was just after COVID. And so that made me, I was relieved to witness, okay, it was art people, but still, we know in the art world some very cynical people as well, and some less cynical. It was the Venice Biennale public, but I saw faces change. Same with Bruce Nauman show. There were people performing outside, coming outside of the show. Then you say, wow, great, that it can happen.
You say it's art people, it's also artificial intelligence, because I asked ChatGPT what I should ask you, and it asked me to ask you about Marlène Dumas in Venice.
Really?
It was the number one question. Yeah, it was really interesting, because we spoke about Marlène Dumas, and I'd been to this show, and it felt, after COVID, like a breath. It felt like an exhalation after a period we'd been holding our breaths for so long. And it was the most popular exhibition, the most sold catalogue.
Yep.
And when I typed into, Google Gemini, what should I ask Caroline Bourgeois, it said, why did she stage the Marlène Dumas exhibition in Venice after the... And I was like, wow, okay. So it's not just an art world crowd, it's also artificial intelligence wanted me to ask you about that.
Well, in the case of Marlène, speaking about community question, identity, first to work with her, it's like making a bubble where she can be secure to take the risk of showing, so to speak. She was very involved too, and it took us quite a while to work with the loans, with the etc. And it's she thinks, to make it short, that elle est traversée. She's not the author of what she does. She's like Marguerite Duras. For me, they're very similar. The work is going through her body. And she worked at night, alone in the studio. She cannot work only when there's a necessity. She's not a studio maker. It's not with painting waiting to go. And she's involved with a political question, individual question. In the show, there was an incredible painting which I insisted to have in the show, which was her having taken a lot of alcohol and painting on the evening naked. And that's how she works. But to dare to share that was also something very important, I think, for me. She's quite exceptional, and it was the first solo woman show in Venice. And I was very happy that that kind of artist. We also had shows which were a lot more produced, like the Damien Hirst, which was like a huge show. And it was a lot more expensive to produce at Equilibrium. But the Marlène Dumas we sold more and we had more visitors than the Damien Hirst. So it was it's the opposite of what you would think. That's why I trust the public also.
Yeah. You said we were talking about dreams and your hopes, and you said it's rough in these times. It can be difficult to have dreams. Do you think that the exhibitions, when the public comes, do you think it's a space where they can dream? And do you think it gives the artist the chance to dream?
I hope it's like I think a work of art doesn't. You can always get explanation or whatever, but it's to allow an imagination, a different level. Most of it, I think, it's more interesting if it brings you into imagination than about demonstration. To make it short.
Caroline, thank you so much for these questions. I think.
Oh, no, thank you to everyone.
Does anybody have any questions, Caroline? Yes?
Thank you both. That was really fascinating. Caroline, I'm curious about how you work with Monsieur Pinault in terms of conceiving of both exhibitions and also acquiring works, and if you work in terms of thinking about all the shows that are coming up or all the places that you're programming, or if when you look at, so it's sort of a two-part question, really looking at the programming that you do together and how that process works with him, but also in terms of your scouting or looking at interesting new artists or works that you want to acquire. I'm interested also in just how that process works, and does he like to visit artist studios, for example, or is that something he leaves to you to do and then comes to him to make recommendations?
Well, when I worked, so I did the video collection, then that was stopped in 2001. When I did then the show about the video collection in France, which was the first outdoor show as the Pinault Collection, we were very little in the office, so to speak. Very, very little. I was after the video show, I joined the collection as a curator, not just a video curator. And for Venice, I did a show outdoors. Then it started in 2011 with Venice, and I discussed the project with Martin Bettenot, who was the head of the Venice Spaces. It's always shared. François Pinault is always involved and was always involved, like for the project of the exhibition, which is not planned so much in advance. That's the private, it's not so much in advance compared to a museum, which is 3 years, 4 years. He can decide now we have to run after, but he can make a very short-term decision. For Venice, it's a need of 1 year. And at the time we discussed, when it was not with Paris, the scale changed with the Paris space. So it's a different way of working now. We discussed with Martin Bettenot at the time, who was the head of Venice, different proposals. Sometimes it's Pinault who say you have to do that. For example, the Martian Rice, we knew it would be a show with Beaubourg, and I took care of the Martian Rice and it was two very different shows, but Martial it's also based on the collection, the ideas. So based on, if it's a solo show, based on the artists that we collect deeply, and it cannot be a young artist because the space in Venice are quite strong. It's risky, so to speak. It's easier in Paris to show younger artists because we have different kind of space. And in terms of including younger artists or French artists, it was because I've been asked that's more in the thematical show, in the group shows, that we always include. So that's the thing. And then François Pinault loved to visit studios. We did a lot of studio visits together. And when now, if he cannot move so much against the younger artists in the collection today is Paul Taburet. So I say he's very clever. Would you like to meet with him? So we went to the studio. So he's someone, in that sense, I think he's quite very exceptional. And all the artists which he visited was impressed by his eye, his presence.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Thank you so much. I have a question. So, Monsieur Pinault, of course, he is, you just mentioned Martial Race, and I remembered an article that I wrote years ago about him and his resurgence of his career and his art. And that made me think of, of course, Monsieur Pinault's acquisitions can drive and really impact the markets of artists, as was the case, because he became a very serious buyer at auction. Prices started going through the roof. And Monsieur Pinault also has been a seller at auction. Obviously he owns Christie's. But are you involved at all with those acquisitions and sales? Do you advise him on how to kind of, and when?
That's also a long question. We've been looking to upgrade the collection, so to speak, but we cannot just buy all the time. So there is some, and also we've been looking at works that we never shown, which is a question. So this is, now we're a committee to discuss all that with the people I quote, with Emma, Lavigne, and Jean-Marie, and he always has the final word. So that's how it happens. And if we don't sell so much compared to and of course, there's some work which are less sellable, even if we don't show it happen. It's the same thing. In fact, what you do with works you didn't show for 15 years. This is one of the questions. So it's a bit like that. At the moment, we keep them, or we lend them, or we try to find a solution that it's still alive, so to speak.
A question. Is there a dream project that you had in mind that was so challenging you weren't able to realize it, or is there one somewhere in the kind of future of your mind that will take such grandiose effort that it feels almost impossible? In your dreaming, where does all that sit?
Well, at the moment, I would say I've been very, very, very lucky to work in such a context and with such people and with such artists. This is for sure. And in the future, well, I hope first, it's difficult to be on the, but I'm sure I will continue to work all my life. So probably leave my seat for younger position and to do something else.
We can take one more question if there's one more question.
Thank you. Could you please tell in this Pinault collection what is your mission and vision? And what is your priority and aims for the future? Thank you.
Well, again, I'm working for Mr. Pinault, and not just for, but it's not me alone, so to speak, but I know his passion. That's why he opened spaces. When I worked on the video collection, it was there were no question of space, public spaces. The collection was personal and became so big that it became another project. But we were three for a long time, so it's not. And his dream is, I share the dream he has, is to be able that art change a life. That's is going to make, and it changed his life when he started to collect. So that's what he wants to share. And at the beginning, in 2000, he was supposed to open a space in Paris, and then it was impossible because there were too many political. It was on the island, and it was impossible. He had to renounce, and it happened that at the moment, Calciari, which was a great mayor in Venice, wanted to open Venice to a lot of contemporary. That changed too. There's a lot more contemporary space in Venice now than it used to be. So that's for me the first main goal. Then I think I've been so again lucky to live my dream in a way when I was younger, and to be so close with so many artists.
Thank you so much, Caroline and
Thank you to
Charlotte, for being
everyone.
here. Thank you. That was wonderful.